Rogue Startups podcast, where two startup founders are sharing lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid in their online businesses. And now, here's Dave and Craig.
All right, welcome back to episode 144 of Rogue Startups. Dave, how you doing this week?
Well, allergies are killing me, but I've had a pretty productive week, so otherwise I'm doing good.
Awesome. There you go. That's the token cough there at the end of the allergy bit. That's great. Sorry to hear you're not feeling good, and I hope it gets better soon. It's like, I guess, end of summer allergy season, I guess?
So yeah, aside from choking on my own phlegm, the end of summer thing is sort of weird. Like, I've had seasonal allergies all my life. And then I did like allergy shots for like 3 years in a row, which was a huge pain in the ass because you're going in every week to do that. But then like I was good for a long time. And then like this year it just sort of hits me. And I used to have like allergies around like pine pollen and grass in the early part of the year. And then like ragweed and sage toward the end of the year before the first frost. And it's not like I've had any problems the last few years, but this year with all the work inside the house, I think it kicked up a lot of dust. And I'm guessing that I must have an allergy to like the oak sawdust that they used when they were stripping the floors or whatever. Yeah. And of course I live in my house, so it's not like I'm just disappearing or anything like that. But I noticed that the times I'm spending outside of the house are a little bit easier on my sinuses than being inside the house. So we're trying to figure out how to clean everything out, but of course that involves me sitting around and cleaning everything out,
which makes it worse. Yeah.
Which does make it worse.
You have a sick house. They used to talk about those after the hurricanes, with the mold and mildew and stuff, and you would have a sick house that just made everybody sick all the time. So there you go.
Yeah, I have an allergy house, not a sick house, but allergy. Yeah. It seems to only be impacting me. I think my kids and wife are okay, although my wife's actually had a runny nose too, so I don't know. So my apologies if I sound a little snarfly or have to have long, awkward pauses that Craig can't edit out in here because I'm coughing or sneezing or whatever.
No, we'll make you sound great. No worries. So kids back in school and everything's getting back to relative normal at your house, though?
Oh, yeah. We've been in school now for almost a solid month.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we're hammering away the first, they've gotten past all of the diagnostic, evaluative stuff that they always do every year, and they're trying to figure out what place should we put your kid in for math and reading and blah blah blah. And so I think they're actually starting to kind of get into a groove at school. They're past the get to know you games and all that sort of stuff. So like my oldest daughter is bringing home some starts of projects that she has to do. And my other ones are starting to bring home homework. So yeah, I would say we're more or less into full swing of school at this point. We've already had like back to school nights for everybody. We've had a round of conferences with one of the teachers. Yeah. I mean, it's been a nonstop barrage of things.
Gotcha. We're just getting into it. The first day of school was yesterday. So it was the 3rd of September, I guess. And so, yeah, it's good. It's the kids' third year here. I can't believe it. It's their third school year they're getting into here in France. And so it's like, old hat by now. Like they're the big kids on the block in a lot of their, grades and classes and stuff like that. So it's cool to see it getting a little easier for the kids and for us as parents and stuff. Like we know the teachers and everything. And so it's pretty cool, but, definitely nice to have a semblance of like normalcy around the house and with working and things like that. Like, very much happy to have the house to myself between 8 and 4 every day. But it's, it's never enough. It's never enough time or whatever. But yeah, it's good. It's nice it was a really nice summer, but it's nice to be getting back into the swing of things for everybody, I think. So everybody needs that that time.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the quiet time around the house as well. So I'll be schlepping the kids off in the morning and get 2 of them off to their school. And then the other one, my wife takes off to school. And then afterwards, it's like this blissful, quiet environment in here while I'm, sneezing my brains out. But yeah, it's been very, very productive lately, which is great. So
Awesome.
I have enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. I guess for me on the work front, the update is that like the summer was successful with not working a lot, which was nice.
Your laziness was successful.
Yeah.
Mission not accomplished.
Well, no. So I mean, I think it really is like kind of a goal and like an achievement is to be able to work less and your business still run kind of similar to how it was when you're working full time. I started another book by the guy that wrote Profit First. It's called Clockwork, and so the idea is like how your business can run like clockwork without yourself. Kind of there. And his goal at the end of kind of getting your business ready to run by itself is to take a month off. So that's a big, hairy, audacious goal that I might have for next year sometime. I don't think I can make it happen for this year. But yeah, the idea of being able to take a month off after being done with the summer where I took like 2 months not working a lot seems really far-fetched, but really nice. So I guess stay tuned. That would be a nice thing to work towards, even if you don't take that much time off, but know that you could if you had to.
That would be nice, actually. But, I mean, I think you still made some tremendous strides there. The fact that you could have 2 months where you're not putting in a lot of intense effort and things are still humming along and the machine did not break down and come to a grinding halt. I mean, that says a lot. So
yeah. So we've been getting there. But yeah, how about yourself? How are businesses?
Well, my August has been filled with lots and lots of extra work time. So my freelancing time has like gone from, where I used to be able to get all my stuff done in a very small amount of time in the 40 hours a week. Now it's taking close to all the time, which is unfortunate. And as a result, like the businesses, I wasn't making forward progress on that. So I sat down with my wife and my kids and I said, all right, look, this is what's going on. Here's what needs to happen. Here are some coming deadlines. This is what I need to push things forward, which was basically on, 4 weeknights a week, I'd be working for an extra couple of hours. And then on the weekends, most of the weekends I would work for 6 to 8 hours each day. So that's a lot. That's asking a whole lot of the family. And, the kids weren't thrilled about it, but they understood why. And my wife has been supportive about it, although it's been more work for her and, some more frustration because there's just more stuff that falls on her plate as a result of that. So she's, more worked and tired and all of that stuff. But with that said, I've actually used the time to good advantage. We've added in a whole new feature to Recapture, which is almost on the verge of like full integration testing at this point. I got it this past weekend. I had a major milestone where I was actually like sending email with the whole thing, and it was like end-to-end working. Nothing was crashing anymore, and stuff was going out. Wasn't totally perfect, and there were definitely some glitches and quirks here and there, but for the most part, like – I could go in, I could adjust things, it would work on the user interface, it would turn around on the timer and send off right when it was supposed to. So like just the end-to-end plumbing part of it finally came together, which was good. So that's exciting. And then the other thing I've been working on is trying to prep a cold email campaign for Recapture to push that out. And so I've been alternating between finding sources of emails, taking those emails, cleaning them up, getting, valid emails, and then deciding which ones are the right people to contact. Because sometimes I'd get a list of a company and it would have like 23 contacts for the company, and you're like, oh my God, that's not going to work.
Yeah, just throw them all away.
So then you got to like you got to go through it and find like who's the one that you think might be it, or narrow it down to like my goal was, instead of throwing it away, because I was like, I feel like I'm throwing away too much if I just get rid of all of them, because there were too many of those companies that were doing that. So I had to narrow it down to 2. If I could narrow it down to 2 people I thought that had like the right title or that their name was on the right place on the website, then I would do it. But figuring that out took a lot of extra time. So there was time spent on that, and then crafting the email campaign, and then I'm using a different domain than Recapture so I don't get like spam scores against me if somebody gets pissed off about it and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm prepping all of that. We've made great progress. I'm like close to being able to push a button on an email campaign for the first
350 emails on that. I got another couple thousand that are sitting in an Excel spreadsheet that needs some more cleaning, but I'm heading towards that as well. So yeah, lots of work, lots of stuff getting done. It would be nice if I had less freelancing to do and more bandwidth for the projects, but that's not how it's working right now. So It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, good that it sounds like you're putting in the hours and getting a lot of stuff done. I know that it's frustrating. Sometimes we all kind of like sit here and spin our wheels and spend a bunch of hours in front of the computer and nothing gets done, and that's super frustrating. So it's good to hear that the time you're putting in seems to be worth it so far.
Well, it is, but on the other hand, like after I've been doing this now for almost 6 weeks, maybe more, I haven't really tracked exactly the full set of weeks that are involved in here, but I'm starting to feel a little bit burned out. And of course, that's a huge danger. You don't want to be burned out because then you can't really carry things to the finish line. So I'm trying to be cognizant of that. And I'm trying to balance the burning out with I need to get this done. And if I were to push, would that be a good thing or a bad thing at this point? And it's a struggle. I'll just put it that way.
Yep. So, after we talked last episode kind of about zombie customers, I thought, and we talked about freemium before that, maybe 1 or 2 episodes before that, I thought it'd be interesting to talk today about the topic, I guess, would be nailing your SaaS trial. And kind of the idea is to how can we all kind of think about and model and optimize our trial periods in our SaaS products so that customers kind of activate and convert. So we have an article that we're going to kind of talk through from 500 Startups. And it was actually written by one of the guys from Autopilot. So Autopilot HQ is like an email marketing service, actually really slick. I looked at it a while back. But it's a really nice article. We'll link to it in the show notes. But they talk about 6 steps to kind of nailing your SaaS trial. And so I thought, Dave, we could talk through each one of these kind of as they talk about it in the article and then kind of how it relates to what we're doing and what we're thinking about.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go for it.
Cool. So step 1 is to define the trial conversion goals. And so I think there's a couple of things you can consider like the goal of your trial. And the obvious one is like a conversion rate. So that's like, someone actually becoming a paying customer. But it might be that if somebody does something in your app which signals that they're activated, that would be like a surrogate or even like a precursor to them converting or not. So a good example of this one, I think, is like an integration. So if they integrate into their Stripe account for SalesCamp, I know that person has a much better chance of actually setting up the referral campaign, getting on the website, getting some results from our app, and then becoming a paying customer in the end. So like for me, the conversion rate is a result of somebody activating and actually doing something in my app. So really, if you're looking at like what can you do that's like a forward-looking indicator, maybe for us it is like actually completing the integration or whatever it is for your app. But I think trying to look at moving the metric that you're tracking to something you can have more influence over and earlier in the process is kind of that's the point I take away from kind of defining the conversion goals. It's not always like the end result,
Yeah. And one of the things that I liked about this article right here is that they actually give some ranges of conversion rates that kind of give you an idea as to whether you're like, you're average or below average or you're totally rocking it. And you don't need to worry about this at all, which is clearly not me based on this conversion rate here, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So the standard, they're saying this is go from trial to paid. And I'm assuming that they didn't say whether this is credit card or no credit card. I'm assuming it's no credit card.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be.
Because I think you would get much higher rates if you have credit card up front. So if you have a credit cardless trial and signing up somebody up from that to paid, a standard rate is considered 7 to 10%. If you're in the 10 to 15% cohort, you're in the quote better range, and best is like anything over 15%, which puts you into like firm Zendesk territory where they've actually bragged about their activation rates on their trial, which is pretty substantial. And then, of course, you need to understand exactly what that looks like. So what is the key point of success your users need in order to feel converted at this point? Like, obviously in recapture, we've talked about this before, but in order for somebody to feel like they're going to want to pay for this thing, they need to see revenue recovered. So there's a series of steps that kind of lead up to that. They've got to connect the extension if they're on Magento, or authenticate their store on Shopify. They've got to turn on a campaign. And then there has to be some elapsed period of time. And sometimes they'll log back in a few times to kind of watch to see what things are going on. But those are sort of like intermediate steps to get there. And then the actual goal, which is to recover revenue in this case.
Yep. Yeah, so going on to kind of step 2 is a little bit similar to the activation point from step 1, but is to pinpoint the key behaviors that correlate to success. And they lay out kind of 4 subpoints here. And the first one is to complete one or multiple actions. So like Dropbox would be sharing a file. Maybe like a project management system would be to invite users from your team. Facebook would be like adding the tracking pixel. I think about also Facebook and Twitter is like they force you to invite 10 of your friends before you can get into the app now. That's like their activation thing so that you have a network and you're getting kind of value from the app early on.
Yeah. And the other 2 about login frequency, and then this other one, this is one I found to be strongly correlated with activations in recapture, is the out of product events. So the example that they give is where they actually contact you via technical support or do a startup call with an account manager or something like that. If you're in a larger SaaS, you might do user training with a customer success person, but that's not, the case for recapture. But almost every single time I've had like a chat session or an email from somebody asking deep questions with recapture, it usually turns into a trial, I've found.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is I've kind of lamented about, Intercom being on Castos, or us using Intercom at Castos several times. And I use Intercom at Recapture, Dave. And I think this is for the trouble that it causes. The value of something like live chat is really strong with this kind of thing. Like if you can get in, have a conversation, a 2-way conversation, that's on the phone or in chat or something like that with somebody, chances of them activating or at least you exhausting every possible way that you could convert this person has been done, as opposed to email where they could just, run off and never get your email or never open it. It's a bad time and they're already moved on to something else. I think if you can catch someone kind of in the moment, it's a huge advantage, even though it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do like about Intercom that I don't get as easily with Drip. Drip does this. It's just the way that they surface it is very different than the way Intercom surfaces it. So with Intercom, if I have a conversation and there's like some onboarding actions that go on automatically in Intercom as soon as somebody signs up, I don't actually work with them directly at that point. So it sends them an automatic in-app message to say, hey, this is Dave. If you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. We respond to every single message. And, there's like some non-zero percentage. I think it was like 12% of the people reply to that at some point, which is awesome. But there's also other things like if I send them an email or I send them something, I can look in Intercom and say, hey, did they actually see this? And you can tell whether they're really going to ignore something or whether they're paying attention to it. And, you can tell, oh, should I follow up with them? They did see this. Maybe they're forgetting about it. Mm-hmm. But if they don't see it, then you're like, oh, well, maybe they just totally went zombie on me or they're ghosting me or whatever. I don't know. So I feel like there is some value in Intercom with that. You can find this stuff out in Drip, but it's like you have to dig into the individual emails and then the subscriber and then look at their behaviors inside of that one email. It's not exposed in a very easy to use way, in my opinion. So. Yep, absolutely. And kind of what you're talking about is what they lay out in step 3 here is to map out your activation nudges. So they talked about a nudge as like reminding somebody tactfully and appropriately at the right time in the app, most likely. So Autopilot HQ has, they call them heads up messages built into their email marketing service. You can send somebody from the email marketing service heads up messages like you would in Intercom.
So I think that's probably a bit why they're talking about this here, but it is really helpful because somebody's like literally in the moment. When they click on the integrations page, you should have a message that says, hey, did you know we integrate with Stripe and with Zapier and with whatever else, so that somebody can actually take that action that's going to activate them. And so they talk about 6 different times. We won't go through all of the points of this, but they talk about 6 different times through the life cycle of a trial here. And the first one is like a welcome message, pretty much right after they log in. And that's to kind of warm them up to you and say welcome and treat them like, you're so happy that they're there, right? Which of course we all are. The second one is some usage tips. So after they've been in for a couple of sessions, say, hey, did you know we have this thing? Or if you check out this resource to help you get started, blah, 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 blah. Maybe a couple of days later, you would say something more of a salesy thing like, hey, this is like our call to action. Sign up here to convert your trial. Or did you know you're already like doing so much, getting so much out of this or doing so much with this tool? Click here to sign up for like the paid version or whatever.
Yeah, and these are some things that I had originally thought that in Recapture I could really push more people towards more success in the onboarding just by bugging them more at certain points. And I think that helped to a certain extent. I haven't gone back and measured the trial to conversion rates because I just haven't had enough people that are doing that to do statistical confidence in that. So I've been kind of, reluctant to kind of get into that analysis. But I did notice that, anecdotally, I've seen that people that are signing up with Magento, they're the ones that usually need a little bit more work to get the extension installed. And if they never get past that, like they're just never going to get anywhere else in the app. So there was always a drip sequence that specifically triggered, and it just bugged them for like 5 days in a row, every single day. Like if they didn't get this one thing, there's no point in sending them anything else.
Yeah.
So I just kept bugging them and bugging them and bugging them. Now, if they did that right away, the whole thing gets skipped and they move on to the next step, which is making sure that the campaign is on. And then when they've recovered their revenue, then the campaign one goes off and the revenue stays on. And it definitely changes and works itself throughout the trial to mirror what their behavior is. And I think that's been much better. I've seen much better response rates to things like that. But there's also the nudge of not just letting them know something, but letting them know in the right way. So sometimes that might be email. Sometimes that might be an in-app notification. Maybe it's like a message inside of the app the next time that they log in, like there's a little notification screen at the top. It could be like a triggered sales call. If your SaaS is a little bit bigger, maybe it actually triggers a call where you sit down with them and say, hey, it's time to discuss such and such about our app right here because you've now gotten to a point where we think you can get a lot of value about it, but we really need to do this one-on-one over voice, something like that. Mm-hmm. And just understanding that it's not all just don't blast them with email all across the thing here, because I think some of that's easy to ignore these days. I mean, I don't know if your index is anything like mine. I just get blasted with so much stuff. Every time I sign up with a SaaS now, I'm completely numb to what's coming on in there. Either I like that SaaS and I'm signing up for it for a reason, or I'm checking it out and whatever those emails that are coming through there, I just, I don't pay attention to them because I know as a SaaS founder what's coming.
Yeah. No, I mean, for sure. I mean, it's funny, Dave. I'm sitting here thinking how great. It's funny. We've been talking a lot about Intercom, but it really is great because it's like a really complete solution. We actually switched away from Intercom on Sales Camp a while ago, and I'm sitting here thinking we should get back onto it because it really does a great job at letting you decide all of these things. When you want to send it, what kind of mode you want to send it in, like an announcement, a little pop-up, an email. Do you want to send it based on time or based on usage, based on number of times somebody is signed into the app, or any of those, right? Because it makes kind of sophisticated decisions. It's not as sophisticated as something like a workflow and drip, but because you can deliver the message so many different ways, I think that overcomes a lot of the shortcomings of Intercom as like a email marketing tool or a marketing automation tool, because it's really like an app communication automation tool. And it's not a term I know, but It really does a good job of this. And I would check out Autopilot because it does both the email and the in-app message stuff. It just doesn't do chat, so that's kind of the only place you get kind of a little short there. But this kind of talks to step number 4 here, is to build the SaaS trial journey. And so you'd want to use some kind of automation tool, whether it's Intercom or Drip or Autopilot, or Help Scout is coming out with chat soon, apparently. I don't know, Dave, if that's going to be like in-app messages or just that someone can initiate chat with you. But maybe that would be an option. But the kind of options you have here in terms of kind of building the SaaS trial journey is to send messages to people based on both time or usage, or a combination of time and usage-based triggers for these messages to go out. And I think it depends on your tool and how you use it and what conversion looks like and what those activation steps are. And they have a really neat kind of like diagram in here to help you decide that. But this is definitely something that we should all be considering when we're communicating with our trial customers or potential customers, is like how and when to send them these messages.
The thing I think that I want to take away from this, I mean, we talked about building the SaaS trial journey before here, so I don't want to beat this too much. And everybody's pretty familiar with what would work for onboarding in your particular situation, or at least you're familiar with onboarding in general because you probably use one or more SaaS services yourself. But I think the important thing to understand here is that if you don't know the discrete steps that they take and what steps distinguish somebody from being active versus inactive or advanced versus basic, that just writing all of that down was a super valuable exercise for me on Recapture to be able to map that out. And then, you can design triggers that go around that. And what those triggers are and what kind of a messaging that brings for your users, you can decide what's more appropriate. I think, the chat versus email piece of this, sometimes I'm seeing that people want to do chat, but it's usually on when they have like a pressing question. And if I initiate something in a little, pop-up chat thing to say, hey, how's it going? I very rarely get responses to those. But when somebody else has said, hey, I tried this thing right here and it's not doing what I thought it should do, according to this documentation link over here, that usually initiates a conversation, which I can then follow up with and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or we're looking to do this, or how's everything else going? Whatever. Mm-hmm. Once you've started that conversation, I think they are happy to join that and follow up with more stuff. But it seems like if you want to get people to talk to you out of the blue, I've had better luck with email than I've had with the in-app stuff, just from a cold contact perspective.
No, totally. I look at in-app messaging as a way for them to get in touch with you. But if you want to get in touch with them, I still think email is the way to go. Yep.
And in step 5 here, they talk about a variety of emails and things like that. Again, this is going to be very much surrounding the usage journey. But if you're talking like a typical thing here, so in the example that they give, there's a sign up and then the welcome email gets generated. And then they've got this one step that sort of differentiates whether they're a basic user or a power user, and it's called uploaded pictures. So if they do that, then you can start sending like a different campaign that says, hey, here's some power user tips of all the cool things in your app that you can unlock. And that's something in an onboarding journey I'd never really thought of before, is like, nudging power users along. Because if you can get a power user really engaged in your app, then they're probably going to be willing to like do an upsell later on because you've got them really dialed into using the app and excited about it. Conversely, if you've got somebody who's a basic user and they're kind of stuck at some point, like they can't upload pictures for some reason, then at that point you need to send them some tips that say, hey, you haven't uploaded any pictures yet. It's hard to get started if you don't upload pictures, and here's 5 steps on how to do that really quick, and maybe a screencast demonstrating what that is. So you can get people past that hump if that's an activation point problem in there. One of the things that I started to do and we never followed through on was how to install the extension. Like I actually had my developer create a screencast
of how to actually do this, but it was like for Magento and Magento 1, and then we were also doing Shopify, so we never finished the Shopify one, and that changed a little bit. So I've got to circle back around and do that now, because I think this would be a perfect thing to send out if somebody has an activation problem and say, hey, we've got this quick screencast, shows you everything you need to do. If you're stuck on this, try that.
Yeah.
And just get them past that. So that's a great thing to do. And then they, have another one here for a usage review email, which Recapture does if you start to recapture some revenue. And then, there's a notion of whether they're active or not. And at that point, if you've got them segmented in drip, you can say, hey, I'll send more pro tips to this person because they're a power user, or maybe I'll just have a general sales email to them if they're not a power user or something like that. So you can figure that all out and then craft your emails and in-app messages and start to make that happen.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, I think this is probably the biggest takeaway for me is to send different messages to users in different part of the journey. Whether they're already being successful, you should send them a different message than you would send the guy that is having a tough time getting started. So we definitely don't do that for Castos, and we should. We just don't track enough of the usage kind of parameters and activity with like our drip triggers and stuff. But I think it's definitely a place where we could improve, even though we have a good trial to paid conversion ratio with Castos. I think it's something we could definitely improve. I think it's always somewhere you can improve. And I think the last point here is to get feedback for those people who don't convert. And that's super helpful. I mean, we have customers that we send kind of a templated, hey, why didn't Castos work out for you email? And we get a decent amount of good feedback from it. I mean, a lot of people don't say anything. Some people are kind of the vocal minority and say something that's not representative, I think, of like what everything else that everyone is saying. But sometimes it's like, we wanted to use this feature and we realized it works like this and that kind of sucked. And you're like, wow, okay, that's really good to hear. And we take that back and put it in our product roadmap at the end. So if you're not sending that, like, why didn't your trial work out email, it's just a nice kind of last step to close the loop off and get you some feedback maybe.
Yeah. And of course, you've got to have something in there that actually is doing measurements to find out what's going on in your funnel there. So whether that's Mixpanel or Kissmetrics or Heap or something custom, you've got to have something in there to figure that out. So speaking of engagement metrics, I just discovered something that I'm kicking myself for from the other day. So you remember in the last episode, we had talked about looking at the ProfitWell engagement stuff?
Yep.
So I went back and I was like, I don't have this stuff installed. I got to go install it. Well, I went to look in my source code. 7 months ago, it was installed.
Oh.
7 months ago. But guess what happens if you don't click, it's installed in ProfitWell?
Oh,
nothing.
No, really?
Abso-fucking-lutely nothing. So I have lost 7 months worth of activation metrics because I forgot to push a button in ProfitWell.
Oh, that sucks, man.
Yeah, I didn't
totally
follow up
sucks.
with it. It wasn't like a priority. Now I've pushed the button. It's like, oh, hey, give us a week. Well, I'm like, oh, God, 7 months.
Yeah.
7 months of metrics. Oh, you're killing me, Dave.
That's tough.
So I could have had better data to work with in the last episode 7 months ago.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough.
So if you put your stuff on, my pro tip of the day is follow through and make sure that your metrics are actually being measured, tracked.
Yeah.
Don't just assume you got it in there.
No, that's a good point. I mean, because you need to at least know that you're getting data. Give it some time, give it a month or whatever, to really start looking at analyzing the data. But anytime I start doing this kind of thing with like analytics or tracking, I just want to make sure that like the hits are getting counted, and then I can go back and figure out what it all means later or not. In a lot of cases, I don't ever go to figure out what it means later. But I mean, I think if you're not at least collecting the data, you're missing out. And then but it really is tough, Dave, like to figure out what some of this stuff means is tough. Like is a cookie being transferred from your main domain to your my app.com domain, and what does that mean in like Google Analytics and all this kind of shit is like really, for me, really complicated. So I think as long as you're measuring it, you can go back and figure it out later. That's my pro tip, is throw a bunch of shit at the wall and then figure out what it means later, I guess. But yeah, I think the people who really nail this stuff are the people that measure everything and iterate and experiment with stuff and see what the data says.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we both probably suck. We both obviously suck at that, but we should
definitely
be better. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, a really interesting article. We'll link to this in the show notes, but we'd love to hear what other folks are doing for kind of nailing their SaaS onboarding and trial. If you have things that you do that you'd love for us to share with the listeners in the next episode, send us a message, podcast@roguestartups.com, or leave a comment below in this episode. And if you haven't already, I'll follow up on our call to action from the last episode. If you're enjoying the show and have a friend that you think would enjoy the show too, please share it with them. We'd love to kind of reach some more people, and any feedback that anybody has would be really great to hear. So thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Rogue Startups. If you haven't already, head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the show. For show notes from each episode and a few extra resources to help you along your journey, head over to roguestartups.com to learn more.